Hello YouTube! A number of rare and quite mysterious finds that were made in Siberia and nearby territories have baffled scientists. Now, I've discussed some before and I'll continue in today's video. I think you'll find them interesting. You know, Siberia is full of secrets and dangers, and they are hidden in the vast expanses, like in the boreal forests. You can lose yourself very easy. Despite the extremely harsh climate, people have lived in this area for thousands of years. Today, very little is known about these ancient societies, and in the permafrost of Siberia, scientists are constantly finding traces of unknown cultures, unusual graves, and completely unexpected DNA samples. For example, in the Russian province of Primorsky Krai, or Maritime province, a skeleton was found that seemed to be having fun. Archaeologists who found this grave in 2017 named the skeleton Mikhail. First oddity was that Mikhail was the only skeleton and belonging to a 30-year-old man in a cemetery for the elderly. And what made him even more unique was the strange pose in which he was found. A similar burial ritual was unknown to scientists. Mikhail was lying on his back, his wrists were crossed on his pelvis, his ankles were also crossed, and his knees were spread apart far from each other. It gave the impression that the skeleton was dancing, but the reality was less festive. Research has shown that Mikhail was probably laid in that grave with his hands and feet tied. Researchers also believe that Mikhail, who lived between the 7th and the 9th centuries, suffered from a disease that deformed his legs. Today it is almost impossible to solve the mystery of the dancing skeleton. But what about Siberian dragons? In the 1970s, Sergei Fifelov was plowing his field in Khakassia when suddenly his tractor uprooted something metallic to the surface. It turned out that these are 8 buckles in the shape of dragons. The age of the artifacts was almost 2,000 years, and they very clearly depicted serpentine beasts. Such a discovery not only added dragons to the ancient mythology of Siberia, but also proved that it evolved without any external influence. Naturally, we can recall the Chinese culture that spread throughout southern Siberia, but at that time, according to Russian scientists, a clear image of the dragon had not yet formed in China. I am not sure if I agree with this, but I want to present this information to you. Research has shown that Fifelov's dragons are unique. Perhaps they were talismans, good luck charms designed to prevent danger, or these products were somehow connected with astronomy. Near the place where the buckles were discovered, there was an ancient place called sunduki, or chests in Russian, which according to scientists the local used as an observatory thousands of years ago. Well, what about copper burials? In the north of Russia, a long-forgotten culture of the 8th century buried its dead by wrapping them in copper. In 1997, the Zelyony Yar necropolis was discovered near the city of Salihard. In 2017, a couple of corpses in unusual burial robes were unearthed at that place. The adult and the 6-month-old infant buried in their own graves were tightly enclosed in cocoons made of layers of birch, bark, fur, and fabric. The most unusual was the use of copper. The cocoon of the mummified child was decorated with copper rings, and the entire body of the adult was wrapped in exactly the same rings. Unwrapping the mummified remains would require a long, delicate process, and scientists were eagerly awaiting information about this mysterious group. At the time of the discovery, the sex of the 1,300-year-old couple that was buried remains unknown. Well, let me tell you about a very unusual place and unusual presence of dogs. In Siberia, most prehistoric villages had several dogs. Usually less than 10 dogs were kept in one settlement, so archaeologists were surprised to find the remains of more than 115 canines in one village. Bone analysis showed that these dogs resembled Siberian huskies but were much smaller in size. Ust-Paluy, located near the Arctic Circle, has been inhabited by people and pets for 2,000 years. Scientists have suggested, based on the findings, that dogs were used for hunting and grazing deer. The restored sledges showed that these animals were also used as draft animals. But this is not all. As it turned out, the dogs in this settlement, among other things, served as food or even sacrificial animals. The remains of 15 skulls were found stacked together, with each brain being divided, I guess, in the same way. Well, this location is in the polar Urals, the edge of the earth. This is where pagan gods were said to be born, and where shamans competed. 2,000 years ago, the paths of those who roamed in the tundra of the Urals and Yamal, and those who paved river routes through the Siberian taiga converged there. Some, the ancestors of the Nenets people, whom I mentioned in my videos, mastered the land along the Arctic Circle. Others, the ancestors of the Khanty, went north along the Ob River. Here, where the Great Siberian River converges as closely as possible with the last spurs of the polar Ural Mountains, there was a crossroads of their paths. Here they fought, made peace, recruited wives into harems, traded, built shrines for their gods, and sacrificed to them. For 80 years, archaeologists have been studying Ust-Paluy. It's a strange place. A lot of household finds, fragments of ceramic dishes, tools and weapons indicate that people did live there. At the same time, judging by the abundance of cult items, fantastic images, this was a sanctuary. Ust-Paluy is like the Hermitage of Antiquity or the Tretyakov Gallery, referring to Russian museums, perhaps. So say the Russian archaeologists, and not by chance. Such an abundance of objects of ancient art of the highest artistic level in one place is amazing. There was somewhat very unusual there. Even the discoverer of Ust-Paluy, archaeologist Andrianov, mentioned the finds of human bones. Subsequent excavations have yielded new evidence. Human bones were found in the burial entirely and separately, which indicates possible human sacrifices. These people were stocky, squat. The buried were laid crouched on their sides in the fetal position. In addition to the remains of people, a figurine carved from a horn was found in the sanctuary, depicting a person in a similar position. At first glance, archaeologists found his sitting posture somewhat strange. The idea arose that this figure was not sitting at all, but a man lying on his side with his legs tucked up. This is the pose of the dead. He had a typical hairstyle, braids, a military belt made of rectangular plates at the back, a face or a mask with huge eyes and a rectangular mouth, which is not typical for a human face. There are many references to human sacrifices in northern mythology. They could be captured enemies, women sacrificed to the gods. The images of the humanoid creatures found by archaeologists, including in the Ust-Paluy sanctuary, date from the early Iron Age to the turn of the 1st to 2nd millennia AD, and are cast in bronze or carved with a knife on flat bronze plaques. The iconography of Anthropomorphos is extremely similar. The figure or head disguise is depicted strictly full-faced and crowned with a headdress resembling a helmet. The figurehead of an animal or a bird, an anthropomorph anthropomorphic disguise often flaunts on the helmet. The Ust-Palusk bone sculpture was discovered at the depth of about 80 centimeters from the modern surface in the layer of dark gray soil, interspersed with embers, burnt bones, organics of wood origin, small fragments of burnt birch bark, and layered ceramics. There were no traces of man-made structures nearby. The figure is carved from the antler of a deer with an iron knife. The height is 7.3 centimeters. The maximum width is 2.3 centimeters. Was it representing a human shape or something that is a little bit more alien to us and observed by the ancient people of the area? Probably the best things were brought here. Trophies were also brought here, according to archaeologists. That's what they say. Archaeologists do not exclude that the Ust-Paluy was not only an altar, not only a sanctuary, but also a kind of laboratory of some new phenomenon. Because it is here that we celebrate a number of discoveries of a new kind of art, they say. There are almost no stones on the banks of the Paluy, and there is masonry on the cape. These stone structures are clearly ritual. They were made in different ways. There are several of them. They are of different shapes. The stones that there lie at different heights. The stones were dragged, or rocks, they were dragged from somewhere. The territory of the sanctuary is surrounded by a moat. It might have separated the sacred territory from the other territory. They put it into what has already been used in rituals and is no longer needed. A bridge was made across it, and birch logs braided with branches were used to clog it. Crossing the bridge is a passage into a sacred place. The bridge is the boundary between the ordinary and the sacred. Archaeologists have found out that in these polar latitudes, 2,000 years ago, people cultivated the land. Seeds of plants, in particular cannabis, of course, were found. Fabric was obtained from its fibers. This means that the climate in the north was much warmer. Ancient hunters tamed birds of prey, the falcon and the white-tailed eagle. The north was not the backyard of the world. There was a lot of life there. The northerners maintained contacts with different regions of the world. It is assumed that many items are of a status nature and got there basically as diplomatic gifts, that is, gifts to local rulers. Probably from the conditional Parthian period to becoming part of the Muscovite kingdom. Now, let's move on to something called Maltese Boy. The ancestors of Native Americans were Eurasians and East Asians who left Siberia during the last ice age. For a long time, researchers have been trying to determine when different migrations occurred and when groups merged together. In 2013, the genetic code of a 4-year-old boy buried near the White River 24,000 years ago was finally sequenced. He was given the name of Maltese Boy. The genome of that Maltese boy, named after a nearby village, suggested that a group associated with Europeans donated, so to say, a third of the genes to Native Americans. Oddly enough, although the boy had DNA unique to modern Native Americans and Western Eurasians, his genome was not related to East Asians. The closest genetic relatives of today's Native Americans are Koreans, Chinese, and Japanese, according to Russian scientists. Such a lack of genetic similarity probably suggests that the boy lived at a time when the population was not yet mixed. Okay, then let's look at the tundra that explodes. And some of you might have heard this story, but I do want to bring it back. In 2016, scientists on a remote island cautiously observed an incredible phenomenon. The white island began to turn into jelly in some places. Whole layers of earth swelled up and then burst like bubbles. A similar phenomenon began to appear throughout Siberia. After the explosions, there were holes in the ground, from tiny pits to giant craters. The width of one of these craters on the Yamal Peninsula was 30 meters. The frightening reality became apparent after 7,000 bulges were discovered on the Yamal and Gidan peninsulas. Concerned about the danger posed by these time bombs, the researchers uncovered several bulges. After a hole was punched in the bubble, highly concentrated methane and carbon dioxide were released from it. What these bulges are is still a mystery, but some suggest that the unique geology of the tundra is to blame. There is an ancient gas belt underground here, sealed under the permafrost. Since the phenomenon appears at latitudes where Eurasia is warming up, it may be that the melting of permafrost allows underground gas to rise to the surface. But no theory explains the explosions. The holes first appeared in 2014 and led to wild speculation that they were caused by Kremlin missile tests. Later, scientists agreed that the craters were formed as a result of underground methane eruptions during the melting of the permafrost. It's still a hypothesis. Analysis of satellite images show that the craters at that place are filled with water, can explode more than once. Professor Vasily Bogoyavlensky now claims that he suspects that drilling of huge gas reserves in Yamal is to blame. The scientist claims that the huge holes were formed due to Russia's attempts to exploit huge gas reserves. Well, let's stay tuned. But meanwhile, let's go on to Karaturuga Gallery. Remarkable cooperation between civilizations of different eras can be seen on the rocks of the border, on the border of Mongolia and Russia. And I told you a number of things about Mongolia. Please see my previous videos, you'll find them. For more than 4,000 years, people have been decorating the Dazdag mountain. Perhaps inspired by their predecessors, each culture added its own rock art to the collection. The age of the petroglyphs of the Karaturuga varies from the Bronze Age to the late medieval era, and apparently about 500 people painted there. The earliest petroglyphs can change the generally accepted opinion that the Siberians of the Bronze Age were purely nomads. Unique images of staircases, indoor scenes and houses were found, and these were far from yurtas. Yurta is the dwelling that they live in those areas. Interestingly, each group invariably painted mountain goats which have been hunted here for centuries, and no one destroyed the work of other people, unlike modern tourists. As a result, a unique ancient gallery has survived to the present times. I don't know if you ever have a chance to be in those areas of Mongolia, and if you ever are, check out this place. I think you'll find very interesting paintings. But now let's talk again about modernity, about the Atragansky Fragment. In 2012, a walk in the forest turned out to be a surprise for local residents from the village of Atragansky. They found a metal object larger than a car. The incomprehensible thing looked like a U-shaped cylinder, with one end tapering into a dome with protrusions. There was a void inside the cylinder. Assuming that the artifact weighing 200 kilograms fell from outer space, the villagers brought it to the village. After no one was able to identify the find, experts from Moscow were called. Rumors about the UFO fragment intensified when, deep at night, in an atmosphere of secrecy under heavy security, the object was taken out of Atraganskaya. As a result, the Russian space agency Roscosmos studied the radioactive find, partially made of heavy-duty titanium, and stated that it was not space technology. Apparently, NASA gave the same initial estimate, but I'm not sure about that. I don't have hard evidence. No further information was received. However, the villagers in Atragansky are attentive and reasonable people. They remember that 3 months prior to that, on December 27, they heard thunder in the sky. The date was not left in their memory by chance. The locals say that a strong earthquake happened exactly that day in Tula. At first, out of the simplicity of their hearts, people attributed the hum to the vibration of the earth crust. But now, naturally, they correlate with events in the sky. They say that it rumbled. Then, for half a minute, it was in the evening. Maybe the notorious piece of iron was flying towards the ground, towards the earth at that time. It is noteworthy that just on the very day when Tula was shaking and when something unknown was deafening Siberians, there were tests on Baikonur, namely the launch of the Stiletto intercontinental ballistic missile. This is a device that is designed to deliver nuclear warheads, which is protected from missile defense. The accuracy of hitting the target is 350 meters. In a word, a masterpiece of military equipment. And part of it might have landed in the Kuybyshev district. By the way, in the neighboring Omsk region, there is a deserted territory on which spent rocket stages have been showering for many years. Trust me, I've written up about the Omsk events for years. It's in my books about UFOs in the USSR. Very unusual events, and trust me, it did not have to do with aliens. So residents assume one of the spare parts may have fallen by. This distance is small, 200 kilometers. This, of course, is not 350 meters, but by intercontinental standards, it is a trifle. The Roscosmos agency promised that they would send their own person for that piece of iron. However, researchers of space do not yet recognize that the massive cylinder is their product. They say that more specialists are needed to look at it. Well, at least they said. I'm not sure about today. I'm not sure about anything today anymore in Russia. According to preliminary estimates, it has nothing to do with rocket and space technology. According to Alexei Kuznetsov, who was the head of the Roscosmos press service, people can only guess. If such a huge thing did not come from the Cosmodrome or spaceport, then where did it come from? Well, it's not a UFO after all. Some media reported that a special commission allegedly found out that the fragment discovered was part of the fuel tank of a ballistic missile launched at the end of December towards Kamchatka. There was also an account or version or hypothesis in the media that the fragment could be part of the fallen Meridian satellite. A group of search and rescue team specialists, experts, went to the site. They checked the radiation background. They said at that time everything is fine. Adding that the chip was delivered to the Interior Ministry Department. But then we found out that it was radioactive. Well, they said that the fragment is most likely made of titanium. Now, the head of the Civil Defense and Emergency Department of the Kuybyshev district also said that in the 1950s and 1960s, in the western part of the district, people often found debris, presumably from spacecraft launched from Baikonur. We haven't found anything like this for a long time, he said. In December 2011, the launch of the Meridian dual-purpose satellite from the Plesetsk Cosmodrome ended in failure. As a result of the failure of the engine of the third stage of the Soyuz 2 launch vehicle, the spacecraft did not enter the calculated orbit, and its fragments fell in Siberia. Well, 17 fragments were found in the Ordinsky district of the Novosibirsk region. One of them fell on a private house in the village of Vagaitsevo, breaking through the roof. You never know what can fall from the sky in Siberia, or what you can discover in the thick of the boreal forest of the taiga. The taiga forest of Siberia belonged to one of the last unexplored places on Earth. In 1978, an aerial reconnaissance of the area near the border with Mongolia was conducted where presumably no human foot had ever set foot before. Surprisingly, a whole family was found in that place. Most adults and children have never seen other people, and two of them became hysterical when geologists entered their house. After everything calmed down, an incredible story was revealed. It was the Likov family, the old believers. That's the Russian Christian believers who do not recognize innovations brought by Tsar Peter I. They call him the devil, and they had problems with Russian governments throughout the centuries. Well, they fled from the repressions under Stalin, leaving for the taiga in 1936. There they lived in secret from everyone for more than 40 years, unaware that the Second World War took place. When the geologists arrived, the mother, named Akulina, had died of starvation 17 years earlier. Father Karp lived with his sons Savin, 45 years old, and Dmitry, 36 years old, as well as daughters Natalia, 42 years old, and Agafya, 34 years old. The two youngest were born in the wilderness, so to say. The Likovs were smart and resourceful, but their religious beliefs and the years of famine became fatal. Being an old believer, Dmitry refused treatment for pneumonia. In the same year, kidney failure killed Natalia and Savin. Agafya buried her father in 1988. The only survivor, the 73-year-old Agafya, refused to join civilization and continued to live in the family home. What I want to tell you is this. I remember the stories told to me by my father, Boris, who had served in the Soviet army in the mid-1950s in Siberia and some other Eurasian lands in the USSR. You know, Siberia is a land full of ancient mysteries. It still is. I doubt there will be much money allocated to archaeology in Russia today, but who knows? Maybe someday sanity will return to the land because there is so much more to discover. And things in the taiga will make you amazed. And I have, through the years, I have told stories told to me by my father in other videos, and from our own experience and from my research and so forth, and I'll continue telling you such stories and latest discoveries pertaining to archaeology and of course ufology. So thank you for your attention to my work. I appreciate it. Please support me through the links you will find in the description to this video. Please tell others like my channel, and I appreciate it.